friends, we made it through Easter. We made it through Easter. We're on the other side of Easter now. And hopefully at least, it took some work from us to get there. If we think about it, it shouldn't be too easy, should it? This Lenten journey, the deepening experience of Holy Week, at the table with Jesus during the Last Supper, in the solitude and the melancholy of the Garden of Gethsemane experience. It can't be too easy, can it? And of course, there's always the specter of the cross, which looms largely over our faith. But the good news, once again, friends, is that Easter has come. Easter has come, and for us Christians, that must mean something. In a word, we've been to the tomb, and we found the tomb empty. All we found there was mystery, giving way to a mingling of uncertainty and excitement in the emptiness. Jesus, who suffered, really did suffer, and who really did die, is somehow now alive in spirit. We can't prove it. Can't prove it, but we don't really need to, do we? It's something that we feel. It's something that we sense. Is it kind of like that for you? One of the most telling affirmations of the Easter experience is how the lives of Jesus' followers and disciples are now, after the resurrection, totally changed. Think about it. They're different people. Peter, John, Andrew, all of them. They're different people now after the resurrection. We can't totally explain it. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but it is a truth we cannot deny. After the Easter experience, they're different. They're changed. And most notably now, they're filled with a new energy and a new sense of purpose for life. Simply put, their lives can never be the same. Can never be the same. There's no turning back. And even through them, hope has now been given a new face. And so in these post-Easter days, the question for us becomes, now what? And now what? What about us? What are we to do? Well, if we really think about our lives, isn't that always the question? After any progression in life, after any success, any crossroad in life, it's always now what? What do we do? After we've graduated from high school or college or graduate school, or finally gotten a promotion at work, now what? After we've married our sweetheart, and our children are perhaps out of the house and on their own, making us proud and can hope. Now what? What do we do? After we finally retired, some of you are perhaps retired as I am. Now what? After we've won the election, after we've worked our way through many different situations in the international arena with other nations, negotiations perhaps with Iran, the Summit of the Americas taking place in Panama as we speak. In other words, friends, after we finally made it to the other side of our human journey, now what? What are we to do? Where are our energies and our commitments supposed to be directed? Well, the message this morning, friends, is that what this is all about in the big picture of things is life. Life with capital letters. Year after year after year, Easter comes and Easter calls us to life. It calls us to give ourselves to life's purposes. And I want to spend some time this morning reflecting on what that might mean for our lives. But if you want to know what God's purposes are for you and for your life, if you want to know what the overwhelming biblical impulse of our faith is about, they're about life. God is about life with capital letters. Through the covenants, through the commandments, think about them one by one. They're all about affirming life, about providing the opportunity so life can exist in community. And also the prophets and their many affirmations. And God finally gives us a particular glimpse of this life in Jesus, in His life, and all that His life entailed, and in His death, and in His resurrection, however we understand it. In what is being called the emerging church, or what we sometimes call progressive Christianity, there's a fresh dialogue emerging. Many of us in the UCC are part of this, to whatever extent. And for many of us in this dialogue, it's increasingly important that we see and understand Jesus as fully human. As fully human. Like you or like me. Fully human. He had real parents. He had a real childhood. Like us, he experienced a full range of human feelings and emotions. Life unfolded in Jesus. Life evolved in and through him, just like it does in us. Remember in the gospel stories, Jesus never claimed that he was God. Now, as is always the case with these sorts of things, context is everything. And of course, Jesus' historical context was very different from ours. And there was also this unique thing about Jesus, what I call the God presence. God was present somehow in Jesus in totally unique and compelling ways. God was in him in just very unique and compelling ways. Over his life, Jesus evolved and grew to become God's Messiah. But again, all of this was a process like it is with us. And it was God's action in him. But again, he was fully human. And therefore he was and is someone we can view with our modern minds and still believe in. Now friends, for the modern church, this is important. Because from what I can tell, thousands of people turn from the church all the time because the Jesus they find presented there, the Christianity they find presented there, oftentimes appears to be not believable. Friends, we can do something about this. It has to do with the way we look at the Bible and the way we understand our faith. According to our reading from 1 John, there are factions in the early church that denied Jesus' humanity. Imagine that. They were called Docetists. Docetism. D-O-C-E-T-I-S-M. These Docetists were dualists who saw a dichotomy between good and evil. For them, the spirit was good, and the body or the flesh were evil. And they therefore didn't want anything to do with Jesus' bodily self, with his flesh. For them, Jesus only seemed to be human. They totally spiritualized Jesus. And they totally spiritualized their faith to where what they did as bodily selves became not that important, which meant they could do whatever they want because it was their body that was doing it. Presumably because they had this spiritual sense of connectedness to Jesus and to the living Christ. Well, Docetism was soon labeled a heresy in the church, and it was resolutely rejected by the early church councils and leaders. However, at the time in the early church development, there was oftentimes a divided development in some of our early churches. It's in response to this that 1 John writes. And he's addressing this question of Jesus' humanity. Check it out from 1 John. We declare to you what we have heard, what we have seen with our own eyes, notice the senses, what we have looked at and touched with our hands concerning the word of life, referring to Jesus. Again, the emphasis in all this is on Jesus' humanity. But what emerged on the other side of this interchurch conflict was again a calling to life. 1 John refers to it as light. Check it out from verse 5. This is the message we have heard from him. The message we proclaim to you, that God is light. And in God there is no darkness at all. And so friends, now what? What are we to do? Well, we're to give ourselves to the light. We're to give ourselves to the light. We're to be people of light. People of light with capital letters. And we're to walk in the light in all that we do. In the modern church, friends, in order to get our minds around the depths of this life to which God calls us, it's very important that we not read the Bible literally. In a sense, biblical literalism is like Docetism, and that it's a distortion of the truth. The Bible wasn't written to be taken literally. It was written in an era where myth and legend and metaphor were common. The Bible should therefore be read as story. It should be read as story, and much of it as symbolic language or as metaphor. And when read in this way, it comes alive with all sorts of possibilities life. The question we should be asking ourselves about the Bible isn't so much, did this happen? Did this really happen? The real important question is, what does it mean? It's the meaning question that's important. Well, let's take a look at our reading from Acts 4. Talk about giving ourselves to life's purposes. This is a picture painted in Acts 4 of community life, again by the author of Acts, after the Easter experience. After the Easter experience. Now, the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possession, but everything they owned was held in common. Wow. Strong emphasis on sharing springs forth from this verse. Again, we don't know if these early Christians actually did this, but still. And then the next verse. With great power, the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great peace was upon them all. And then check this out, friends. There was not a needy person among them. That's right there in Acts 4. Wow. This is what we're supposed to be doing after Easter. Not a needy person among them. For as many as owned lands and houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold, laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. Wow. If we let this settle in, this reading, it's pretty subversive stuff, isn't it? Now again, we don't need to take it literally, but still there are some very compelling points that are suggested here. First of all, people had a sense of unity. They were of one heart and soul. Clearly they shared a common commitment to one another. A commitment to community that was transcendent of themselves. And secondly, get this, they related to community in such a way that there was not one needy person among them. Imagine that. Not one needy person among them. Sounds pretty Christian to me. And so, now what? What are we to do? Well, level the playing field of life for starters. Strive in all that we do for a just and more fair community life. The life to which Easter faith calls us is a life, friends, for everyone. We know that. That's a mouthful, but still we know that. When we give ourselves to life's purposes, when our vision of life is a life that welcomes everyone to Christ's table, it's a new day. Easter calls us precisely, friends, to such a new day. So now what? The words of Acts 4 sound out in response to this question. And there was not a needy person among them. Friends, if we were to apply this to our modern situation, not a needy person among them is a crying out for justice and fairness, isn't it? In healthcare, in education, in job creation, in minimum wage, immigration reform, right down the list. This is what Acts is suggesting we need to be about in these post-Easter days. Oh, what a day. Now, none of this is going to happen overnight, as we all know. But it's always a faithful starting point for the now what situation that follows Easter. And great grace was upon them all, friends. And behold, there was not a needy person among them. All praise be unto God. Amen.